Are you ready to join me on this journey as we currently walk on the current boardwalk here in Island Heights in Toms River, New Jersey? And we are going to just, as we walk, take a little bit of thinking about and going through the history of where we're currently walking and what was here, what we're going to do in the story fashion. Let's go! All aboard! If you stood on the Island Heights bluff in the late 1870s, you'd have smelled salt and pitch pine, heard the slap of skiffs on the Toms River, and on summer Sundays, the Methodist meeting crowd had just staked a circle of tents and cottages under the oaks, dreaming of a wholesome resort on the high ground above the bay. What that lacked was an easy way to get the faithful and the merrily curious there. The Pennsylvania Railroad obliged. By 1883, which is really cool in itself, it took almost 13 years for people to actually put a train going through Island Heights along the water as we're walking here. So the PR surveyors had traced a line across the county and thrown an audacious 1,800-foot manual swing bridge over the Toms River from Pine Beach to the Island Heights shore. The following year, a compact station appeared on the waterfront, plank, platform, ticket window, and kites, and it bode wide so engines could nose in, turn, and head back toward Camden. In season, the trains delivered everything from coal and lumber to trunks and straw hats. Many passengers stepped off and drifted to the Edgewater Hotel on the boardwalk for bay breezes and a play of oysters, which is really cool in itself, that a train on that put, and trains still get used today for these same purposes. Can you just imagine, as we're walking here, what went on since 1870s, 1883? I mean, just the late 1800s. I mean, this is just amazing. Let's see what we can find out more further. And if you haven't yet, I'd appreciate if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and continue to join me on this journey as we're going to really make some really fun further videos as we go along here. The island's mood changed with the timetable. Mornings brought the mail, and milk afternoons, families in their Sunday best, evenings, lantern glow along the platform and the clank of couplers before the last run west. As the PR tied its shoreline ever tighter to Philadelphia, the 1897 Delaware Bridge made it a true Oriole trip. Summer specials at the Commodore took Island Heights into a larger level of seaside leisure. That's very cool. Nature, of course, had a vote. In the brutal winter of 1913, pack ice in Barnegat Bay shoved hard against trestles and destroyed hundreds of feet of bridgework, forcing emergency repairs and reminding everyone that rails laid to the water's edge were always negotiating with wind and tide. Even after the fix, the automobiles' rise nibbled away at patronage through the 1920s. By 1931, regular passenger service to Island Heights ended. 3 years later, the river bridge was dismantled. Locals would talk for decades about what might have been if the crossing had become a county road. Yeah, that would actually be very cool to see here. I mean, you just look out the water and you get to see what's going on. Can you imagine an actual bridge that actually went across here? What amazes me more is the fact that it ended in 1933, let's say. So you only went from 1883 to 1933, and there was no more train that ran through actual Island Heights. I mean, wow. But at the same time, the development that happened because of all that, all the housing and everything that you see here, all happened because of people already came to the area, and people are still coming to the area. So that itself is really cool and really a fun fact to really delve into a little bit. Let's get back to it. The broader PR short route limped along until one last dramatic punctuation mark. A pre-dawn fire in December 1946 that consumed a long stretch of the Barnegat Bay trestle towards Seaside Park. The ICC soon allowed abandonment east of South Toms River, and by the end of the 1940s, track crews were pulling iron out of the sand. Today you read the old right-of-way in the curves of streets and the ghost lines along the shore faint, but still there with nowhere to look. And as you're seeing here, as we're walking along, and you get to see, I mean, just look, there's vibrant community here. There's people, people fish, people grab, whatever they're going to do here. It's amazing how history, in a certain sense, repeats itself, but we get more modern. Stay tuned for the next piece on the next stop in South Jersey. Thank you for watching until now. Looking forward to having you continue on the journey with me. Let's head on to the next stop. Let's go, all aboard. Here we're going to head to Berlin, New Jersey. On a quiet morning in 1853, the ear in South Jersey carried the smell of fresh cut pine through a stretch of mostly untamed land. A small group of surveyors and laborers marked a path that would soon change the course of the region's history. This was the birth of the Camden and Atlantic Railroad, a single ribbon of steel meant to connect Camden on the Delaware River to the sandy shores of Atlantic City. One of its most important stops would be a place with an unusual name, Long A Coming. Yes, you heard that right, Long A Coming, C-O-M-I-N-G, which is interesting in itself. And yes, it's definitely a fascinating name. At the time, it was little more than a small settlement, a convenient midway point where stagecoaches once paused before the final leg to Camden. But when the railroad came, everything began to change. By 1856, a new Italian-style station rose between East Taunton and Washington Avenues, built of wood and designed with the elegance of its era. It featured arched windows and overhanging eaves, and a touch of refinement amid the Pine Barrens. Oh wow! This is actually went through the Pine Barrens. Man, that's an interesting fact. This was the Long Coming Depot, and it soon became a welcome sight for travelers heading for the city or the shore. Changing names. Now that the train gets name in 1867, the railroad company decided the station's curious name needed a more practical touch. For 3 brief months, it was called Magnolia, but that caused confusion with another nearby town, and so the station and the town around it took the name Berlin. The change stuck. Then, by the 1880s, the Camden and Atlantic Railroad had been absorbed into the vast network of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which brought more trains, more travelers, and more freight through Berlin. The tracks bustled with summer tourists, bound for Atlantic City's boardwalk and gamblers eager for the bright lights. Locals would watch as sleek locomotives thundered past, their whistles echoing across the farm fields. Eventually, the line became part of the Pennsylvania leading seashore lines, which ran much of South Jersey's rail service. Through the first half of the 20th century, Berlin's depot was alive with the rhythm of arrivals and departures. Well, now it's time to say goodbye. But the golden age of rail was fading. After World War II, more Americans-owned cars and highways began to steal passengers from the trains. Freight still moved through Berlin, but the crowds of travelers dwindled. By the 1960s, the double-track main line was reduced to a single track, and the once busy depot sat quieter with each passing gear. And as you're going to be watching this video, you'll be able to see the movement that the second track is still here. At least part of it is still here, and you'll be able to get to see as well that the building is still there. Obviously, it got fixed up over time, but the building is still there. The structure is still there, the tracks are still there, and more fascinating in itself, there's still a train that doesn't stop in Berlin anymore, but there's still the tracks are still used today in 2025. But let's continue. Let's get back. In 1968, Pennsylvania Railroad decided the old station was no longer worth keeping. Demolition seemed certain, but Berlin's citizens had other plans. A determined group blocked the effort, rallying to protect their town's historic landmark. Though the station closed around 1969, it survived empty but standing. For decades, the building waited, its paint peeled, its timbers weathered, but its spirit endured. In 1994, the Long Coming Historical Society stepped in, securing a 99-year lease for the building for the symbolic price of $1 per year. Volunteers worked tirelessly, repairing, painting, and restoring the depot to its former dignity. These people deserve a lot of credit for keeping history going and really building history and continuing to keep a place and history moving forward. By 1996, the station was alive again, not with passengers but with history. It became a museum, a meeting quote, and a proud reminder of Berlin's past. So very true. Today, modern trains still roll through Berlin, now part of the New Jersey Transit Atlantic City line. But they no longer stop at the old depot. Instead, a modern station at Atco handles commuters. Yet, if you stand by the old tracks on a quiet afternoon, you might still hear the faint echo of a steam whistle or picture the bustle of travelers from a century ago. The Long Coming Depot, New Jersey's oldest surviving train station, remains weathered but proud, a survivor of the age when railroads ruled, and Berlin was a vital link between the city and shore. I mean, this is just beyond amazing as we're walking through here, and I'm sure by now you must probably hit that like and subscribe button because you're joining me on this journey, right? Yeah, you did that. You did that already, right? Because I appreciate that you listened until now, so don't worry, there's more to come. And on top of that, getting back to a little bit, what's amazing is that train line is still being used today. The other amazing facts here is we're able to physically walk because people in the late 1990s went ahead and put up a fight to be able to keep history in its place. It's amazing how certain parts of history just keep on staying in place. Let's together, for now, get off the train, but let's head to the next stop. Stay tuned. It's time to hop on board as we head into Pepperton, New Jersey. You heard that right, Pepperton. Let's go. All aboard. At first light, the old station wears its brick like a memory. The eaves throw long, slanted shadows across the platform boards. The sign simply says Pepperton, as if that one word could explain a century and a half of comings and goings, family reunions and milk cans and troop trains and blueberry crates. The building itself, low, handsome, Queen Anne brick with a broad sheltering roof, went up in 1892. It's the kind of station that seems to lean in when you speak, and that makes you feel a train might still nose around a bend if you wait long enough, and for a long time it did. But Pepperton's real story starts years before these bricks were laid. Back when Burlington County was learning to trade speed for certainty, in 1849, the Burlington and Mount Holly Railroad sketched a short iron path to the county seat. Within 2 decades, the line lunged west to Camden and east to Pepperton. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Railroad later called the Pepperton Branch, a 22-mile conduit between farmtown and ferries, city markets and sawmills. In its fullest reach, that branch ran from Livonia Yard near Camden all the way to Pepperton Township, a straightforward piece of track that changed the daily math of the county. What could be grown, how fast it could be sold, and who might show up for supper. Today, the old branch survives in fragments, its western end still in use to Mount Holly, a practical ghost with once longer reach. Pepperton was also the latch on a bigger door, a cross-state shortcut. As the Pepperton and Hightstown Railroad opened in the 1860s, chartered in 1864, finished in 1868, that 24-mile ribbon linked Pepperton to Hightstown and by extension to the mighty Camden and Ambler Main Line. If you were a dairyman with cream to sell, or a farmer with marl or hay, P&H made it suddenly possible to push perishable value over the horizon before it spoiled, which is fascinating in itself, that the trains were really making a difference and advancing and modernizing something so simple, but yet that important. Four passenger trains, they rattled along soon after opening, and the line passed through hands, and this is typical of the era, Camden and Amboy first, then under the ever-widening umbrella of the Pennsylvania Railroad. In time, a local operating company, the aptly named Union Transportation Company, took the throttle on daily work, while the PR held the deeds. The first Pepperton depot was a wooden house of arrival built by the Camden and Amboy in the early 1860s, and it served faithfully until the autumn of 1891. When fire took it down to the foundation, the town threw up a temporary shelter. In 1892, they did it right. John S. Rogers of Moorestown designed a brick Queen Anne style station with generous canopies, sturdy brackets, and the kind of human-scaled ornament that makes even a hurried traveler slow a step. If you stand under those eaves today, you can almost hear the tap of the station agent's key and the dry rasp of freight waybills sliding across a counter. The past still speaking in the architecture's plain confidence. At the turn of the 20th century, the station's heartbeat synced with the bogs and barrens. The pine barrens around Pepperton were not empty. They were industrious, especially in the seasons that mattered most. Cranberries went out in autumn, and blueberries in their turn as a crop to cold box-barreled and weighed in rooms that smelled of wooden iron and fruit. The Pepperton platform saw those great stacked to eye level, an outward migration of color and sweetness bound to Camden, Philadelphia, and points beyond. The station became a rural hinge. Farmers and pickers in, freighting tickets out, mirrors of each other's needs. And then came 1917, and the creation of Kentix. Carved into the pines north and east of town, the logistical partner that the wheels made possible. It's easy to picture the scene: flat cars clinking with lumber, gondolas of coal, boxcars of rations and blankets. Later, coaches and troop sleepers filled with young faces, looking out at trackside kitchens and laundry lines, the Pepperton station and the Regent's rails, including the PR's Pepperton branch and the nearby Kincora branch, served as lifelines during World War I, delivered both the bulk materials needed to stand up a massive training camp, and soon enough the recruits themselves. History shrinks time here. In a few miles, the countryside went from quiet to organized thunder, and the station learned to keep pace. The interwar years settled into the kind of reliability that only a small station can provide. If you had mail to meet, you learned the schedule. If you had a calf to ship or hardware to receive, the agent knew the right car order and the right date to expect it. Morning fog when packets lifted to reveal section men shouldering their tools, and by afternoon the platform boards warmed under the shoes of schoolboys bound for elsewhere, mothers with parcels, men with folded newspapers. This was a time when a station seeded confidence. If it was on the board, the train would come. The broader Pepperton Hightstown route stayed busy with emigrant freight and local passengers, a thread that held together the farm belt's everyday commerce. You can still trace some of that alignment today, not by whistle but by bicycle and hoof. The Union Transportation Trail occupies miles of the former P&H roadbed roof that alignments once caught tend to outlive even the strongest locomotive. Change came not as a shock but as a slow tide. Trucks took the light freight, and then with the broader roads, more of the heavy commuters followed the buses and cars. The Pepperton station did what small depots do in such times. It kept its ledger tidy, swept the platform, and met what trains remained. By 1969, the service between Pepperton and Camden ended. The train stopped coming as if a conversation had trailed off mid-sentence. A building designed to orchestrate arrivals and departures learned stillness. Stillness did not mean abandonment. Within a decade, the station and nation named the station for what it was, a piece of public memory worth guarding. The North Pemberton Railroad Station was listed on the New Jersey Register for Historic Places in 1977, and on the National Register in 1978. That recognition was more than a plaque. It was a promise that the building's materials, its core-built brick, its engraved brackets, its hip and gabled roof, would carry their story forward. The nomination papers describe the plan in fabric with the unsentimental care they shot foreman, but even in that plain description you can hear affection. In the decades that followed, the station learned yet another trade. Museum, exhibits about the Pinelands, and the township's own history filled the waiting room where tickets once exchanged hands, and volunteers curated photographs and postcards. School children piled of buses in the spring light to see what their grandparents remembered. There were fits and starts, leases negotiated and renegotiated, seasons of closure and renewal. But the through line held in May 2024. After a spell of quiet, the doors reopened with local fanfare, a welcome center, and history museum again. The station doing what it was born to do: receive. You stand on Hanover Street and look along the trackside Now you can still read the landscape like a timetable. To the west, the Pepton branch once threaded toward Camden. Today, Conrail shared assets maintains a working remnant when spoken to my valley. An iron in the weeds where the economy stalled and justified steel. That's a different story than the one Pepperton knew, but it's akin to it. Rails lasted where use lasts. Rails lifted where need moves on. North and east, the ghost of the Pepperton Heights line continues as memory and trail. The modern gravel of the Union Transportation Trail rolls over the old right-of-way, a gentle path that crosses the same creeks on low ground the railroad once bridged, where lanterns swung, bike lights blink, where timetables once pinned lives to a clock. People linger or move as the day suggests. To walk that trail is to understand how a railroad is a scene in the land, and how communities keep mending alongside it. But history is not a stream of dates so much as an inventory of sounds. So very true. In Pepperton, that soundscape was varied and precise. The chuff of early steam lifting into winter air. Later, the steadier note of diesel, a lower, more patient growl, hoofbeats on a muddy road, giving way to the thud of milk cans on a platform, a brakeman shout, a metal shriek when a coupler balked, the slap of a baggage cart's wheels, finding a floorboard seam. On long summer evenings, the frogs along the Rancocas sing under all of it, like a chorus that refused to be drowned out. The station gathered and amplified those noises until they were part of the town's own voice. On the station is a geography of people of age and cap-brim polished with use, who could copy a train order and listen for a child's lost mitten in the same minute. The farmers who counted cash in careless hands and scolded themselves for forgetting a veg line. The boys who didn't yet cope their here, and the men already stooped. The women whose errands stitched together households. The newcomers who learned within a month that you didn't linger on the platform edge because certain engineers liked to throw the throttle for fun. Pepperton learned through the station to synchronize small urgencies with large movements. Wars measure themselves in trains. World War I drafted Pepperton into national service. The rails complied. Coal poured towards Camp Dix like a dark river. Heat made manifest that turned pine barrens into barracks. Lumber arrived as a forest of square trunks, stacked and labeled, and then rose as roofs and floors and mess holes. And then the men, their travel in the plural, the company, the regiment. Some came back the same way, others didn't. The station learned to hold a welcome and a worry at once. People practiced in parade ground stoicism under a canopy of decorative brackets. Between those fire-hot episodes, Pepperton was comfortably specific. Railroads are often caricatured as sweeping instruments of national destiny. But the branch and the core state link mattered because they offered relief from isolation. The Pepperton and Heights arrival took hours off a journey and gave the region leverage in setting prices. If you can deliver milk to market before noon instead of tomorrow, you bargain as a partner, not as supplicant. If your bog berries catch the Camden ferry with time to spare, you can risk planting an extra acres. The scale is small, the stakes are not. That was the pattern the Pepperton lines perfected. Dozens of small wins multiplied into a living. The right-of-way traced the contour of need. Horse cart roads too sandy in July, creek ports too shallow in drought. Iron offered an alternative. The Pepperton branch knotted together Mount Holly and Maple Street and points between. The P&H threaded farm towns across county lines. The Concordia branch fell in on the north. Langdon met that caught freight and passengers alike to study the map is to see a county deciding to get somewhere together. Stations are also teachers of endings. By the 1950s and 60s, trucks muscled into almost every errand the railroad used to run. Passenger cars fell out of favor. The Pepperton Depot, for all its handsome stance, couldn't outcharm the convenience of a steering wheel. When the last service to Camden ended in 1969, it felt less like a final curtain and more like the lights left on in an empty theater. If you've ever heard a silent building, you know the sound. Yet buildings with good bones invite new purposes. The brick didn't forget how to hold heat. The roof remembered how to shed snow. The platform boards still knew where to creak. Preservation is a form of daily love, not a single thundering act, and Pepperton's people practiced it, listing the station on state and national registers, stabilizing the structure, telling and retelling its story until the story itself became part of the mortar. Curators and teachers and retirees built exhibits. Kids turned into docents. The township kept a hand on the tiller. When the museum reopened in May 2024, it was proof that useful things are often the same as beautiful things. A welcome center and a building designed for welcoming, a history museum in a place where history once arrived at 10 past the hour. If you want to find the line's future, follow the rails west as far as they go, and the footpaths east where the rails are gone. The Pepperton branch is a living segment. Pennisquan to Mount Holly still hums under Conrail shared assets, a remnant that answers to customers rather than nostalgia. The rest is either memory or repurposed right away. The Pepperton and Heightstown corridor, pressed now into the Union Transportation Trail, shows how corridors can be reused without losing their original instinct to carry people, to reduce friction, to make the ground go by with a little less effort. The North Pepperton Station stands as a conduit translation device. It takes the abstraction of railroad history and makes it tactical. You can touch the brick, you can count the rafters, you can stand on the platform and measure the distance to the road with your own steps. It explains the Pine Barrens in slow, legible chapters, the farmers and bogs, the war and the peace, the started progress of gasoline engines overtaking steam. It explains the county in the same way, the choice to be connected, then the labor to keep connections honest. The station teaches continuity without pretending it's the same thing as sameness. If you walk around to the trackside and face east, the day feels wider somehow. You're looking along the line that once knew the treads and heels of thousands of people, the wheels of thousands of cars, A dozen towns resupplied their lives along this axis. So did a military camp that became a base, that became a joint installation. So did bogs that became brands. So did families that became addresses. The line itself may be truncated, but the alignment is still there in the grass, the ballast, more than a rumor. The late afternoon, the station's shadows lies long again on the slime Pepperton, reads almost like a closing sentence, but the building doesn't close. It returns to being a neighbor. In the museum rooms, curated stories breathe in the same air where timetables once sparked orders. Out back, the rail trail picks up a conversation that the last locomotive left unfinished. If you listen closely, you can hear how the past pronounces itself in the present, not loudly, not mournfully, but with the steady cadence of a train that knows its route and keeps it. Every town keeps its time with objects that refuses to lose. Pepton kept a railroad station, and saving the building the township saved the loop of history the station represents. The way a branch line could change a county's diet and distance, the way a cross-state connection could farm out perishable confidence, the way a nation at war could reach into a small place and bottle everything it knew how to make. The station is a ledger of those exchanges, a witness whose account we can check against the record, and the record is generous. So the story of Pepperton Station and its airlines is in the end a story about a community and its preferred speed. Once that speed was measured in miles per hour in the bite of a coupler, now it's measured in Sunday museum hours, and how long a volunteer will talk with a curious kid in deliberate basically walk around the trail. The station approves and knows the value of a good timetable and how to keep time even after the whistles fade.